My name is Willie Mims. I am the education chair of the East County NAACP. I am 76 years old. I am retired educator from the Vallejo Unified School District. I retired in 2009. I retired from the work world, but I'm not retired at all because I'm still dealing with the political and educational world. When I was in high school, I considered myself to be a class clown as I look back on it back in those days. I really never did learn how to write. I knew how to do math, all the way up to not algebra, pre-algebra, but I could not write. So when I graduated from high school, I graduated without having the ability to know how to write a complete sentence. I did not know how to end a sentence. I knew how to start one, but I did not know where to put a comma and a period or anything else. So to the students who are observing this, I would encourage you that if you have the ability to write a complete sentence, there's nothing that you cannot do, because you're looking at someone who have an AA degree, a BA degree, a master's degree, and a California teaching credential. So if I can do it, you can do it. But let me back up and say, I want to thank the Pride Conference facilitators and the administrators for inviting me to speak to you. And I want to thank everybody who participated in the production of this holy Pride Conference. I went to school 12 years from the first grade to the 12th grade without seeing anybody who looked like me. And the first teacher who I saw who looked like me was at DBC College. So I would encourage the students who look like me to please go into the field of education, because there is a dire need for teachers of color, especially those who look like me. There's a severe shortage. So I would encourage you to do that. This is the Pride Conference that we're having this week within the Liberty Unified School District. But I want to also remind you that this is also Black History Month, or African History Month. So there is a distinct difference between the two. Black history entails a whole history of black people throughout the world. African American history only deals with the history of African American people from 1619, when they first brought 20 black folks over here, 16 men and 4 women. So African American history begins at 1619, but black history goes back thousands of years. So there's no starting date for black history. So I want to make sure that we clearly understand that, and that you clearly understand that. There's 2 or 3 concepts or words that's been used for so long that I want to make sure that you understand from me that there's been some deception. And before we get to Abraham Lincoln, let's talk about the word slave and slaves. The common thing is that they've told African people and everybody else too here in America that they brought slaves out of Africa. They brought prisoners of war out of Africa. They didn't bring any slaves out. They brought prisoners of war, chained them, and brought them across the Atlantic and put them in slavery in America. So when you use the word slaves, you are using a word that dehumanizes the very people that they dragged out of Africa. So it's a form of dehumanization. So because you cannot see a slave. You can see a human being with chains around his or her neck, on legs and arms, but you can't see it. So you have no concept, no perception of what a slave looks like. And so I would encourage all of you, don't use the form or the term slave or slaves at all that they brought out. They brought prisoners of war who were captured, loaded on those ships, and brought to America and put into slavery. Okay, so please stop using that form. Then the other perception or misconception is the famous President Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, they say, freed the slaves. And as I told you before, he didn't free slaves is not a term that you should be using. Abraham Lincoln did not free anybody. He signed a document on January 1st, 1863, which is Emancipation Proclamation. That Emancipation Proclamation only freed the enslaved folks that were in rebellion against the Union, but there were other states who still had slavery, but they stayed with the Union. So Lincoln didn't free those people. He didn't free anybody anyway. He couldn't free anybody. He had to fight. There were 4 Emancipation Proclamations. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation was the last one. But let me talk about another Emancipation Proclamation which truly Lincoln signed and freed all the enslaved people in Washington, D.C. That is called the D.C. Emancipation Act of April 16, 1862. Washington, D.C. held the most enslaved people in this country, period. It was a disgrace to the Union. It was a congressman, I think by the name of Sumter, who fought and brought forth legislation to free all of the enslaved folks in Washington, D.C. There were 3,200 of them. Lincoln signed it, but he had nothing to do, but he signed it. And once he signed it, that was the first emancipation of black folks in this country. That freed 3,200 enslaved African people. But Lincoln had a proposal. The slave masters, they were given between $200 to $1,200 a piece for each enslaved person that they held. But the folks who had been held in slavery, they were given a choice. I think it was $100 or $200 if you left the country. But if you didn't leave the country, you got nothing, zero, period. And so this was the price that the newly freed black folks had to pay, in which they paid the masses of these folks, but they gave black folks a choice. Leave this country and we give you $200. If you stay, we give you nothing. So I want to make sure you clearly understand about what Lincoln did. That was called the D.C. Emancipation Act of April 16, 1862. That was the first time that black folks were set free in this country. In order, I would encourage all of you is to learn something about your history. I grew up and went through 12 years of school and 13 or 14 years of school and even college and did not know anything about the role that African people played in the world or the U.S. history. There are 2 distinct books that I would encourage all students and everybody else who desires to learn anything about the role that African people played in this country from 1619 to 1965. There are 2 books. One is called From Slavery to Freedom by John Hope Franklin, and the other one is called Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr. Those are the 2 distinctive works on the history of black people in this country. And so you should learn something, learn about your history. Everybody should learn about their history. People all races should not grow up not knowing anything about the role that each of the races played, especially the role that black people played in this country, which has been somewhat overlooked and dismissed. But I just wanted to somewhat share that with you. But back to this whole concept of wanting to learn something. You know, this whole conference called the Pride Conference. So if you are somebody like me who spent 12 years going through the school system, and during those 12 years, I saw nothing positive about the role that black people played in this country or in the development of the world itself. Nothing. So I did not have a sense of pride at all in my people, in myself. So you know, so this Pride conference is very, it's very critical because it makes one, you know, when you learn something about yourself, you become proud of who you are. Yeah, and you walk with a great sense of pride because you know that your people and you have done something that have made a major contribution to this country and the world. In terms of the Civil War and Abraham Lincoln, I'm not to him again. I don't want to be on, but I'll make sure you clearly understand what Abraham Lincoln did. Abraham Lincoln, he issued his Emancipation Proclamation because prior to that January 1st proclamation, the North had not won one major battle. They had gotten their butts kicked all the way through. Lincoln's generals were pleading with him to turn the soldiers loose. So they had black soldiers who had been trained to fight in the war. Lincoln did not want them to fight because he didn't want to give the appearance that these soldiers were coming to save the Union. So he asked his generals, win me one major battle. That's all I want, one major battle. And I'll turn these soldiers loose. So Lincoln, his generals won a battle, but they blew it up and tried to make folks believe that it was a major battle. It was a minor battle that the Union won, minor. And that allowed Lincoln to make his Emancipation Proclamation because he needed those soldiers to win the war. African soldiers, over 240,000 African soldiers participated in that war. Without the role of the African soldiers, the Union would not have won that war. So Lincoln did not free those enslaved Africans. Those enslaved Africans, those soldiers, fought and freed and was able to free this country from this vicious enslavement. So I want you to just do some research on that because the history books don't tell about the role that the African soldiers played in winning that Civil War for the North. It's been relegated to the cesspool of America's history. So my job is to attempt to resurrect some of that cesspool and provide the truth to you. We have 3 amendments that they attribute to us, black folks. That's the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment. The 13th Amendment ended slavery. The 14th Amendment gave black folks citizenship. The 15th Amendment gave black men, not women, because women were not allowed to vote, black men the right to vote. So I would encourage all of you to study your history, to learn something about your past, to study world history too. But the one of the things I want to get back to you as students, you know, in the classroom. It's very important that, you know, like I said, when I was in the class with the teacher, I was basically a class clown. But I left out of the school system without having the ability to write. I had one asset, my ability to read. So if you can read, you're 10 miles ahead of me. If you can write, you're 10 miles ahead of me. Okay, so just concentrate on your schoolwork. Do the best that you can. Don't settle for average. Anybody can be average. You know, I had students in my class. I had 5 students in one of my classes, and these students were, I call them pseudo-intellectuals. Their vocabulary was deep, you know, and when they spoke to intimidate. It was 2 black boys, 1 white boy, and his name was White. They were all friends. And then it was 6 of them. It was a Hispanic lady and a black girl and a Filipino, 7 of them. And when they spoke to intimidate. When they took a test, they got mad if they missed one. Those are the only students I hated to return their test back because, you know, they were laughing at each other. They strove for excellence. They, you know, just all A's. That's all they want is A's. So, you know, if you guys can just think about doing the best that you can and study and take your education serious. Because education is nothing to play with, because as time go by, you lose out. So anyway, I don't want to say anything else. I mean, but anyway, like I said, strive for excellence. Don't settle for average. Anybody can be average, and please don't be below average. Strive, be like those smart kids that I had in my classroom. They were so smart that nobody wanted to be in my classroom with them at all. But anyway, I want to say peace, and I want to thank again for the administrators for inviting me to speak to you. And remember, this day is Pride. It's Friday, and also, it's Pride Week, and remember also this is Black History Month, and also just always find something to be proud of. Do something that will make you proud, that make your parents proud, to make your teachers proud, and make your administrators proud. Be positive. Okay. Thank you.